Creativity is inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun. Mary Lou Cook. Welcome to Deep Dive Creatives, a podcast that explores the creative process. I'm David McGinnis, host of Deep Dive Creatives. Please take a moment to hit that subscribe or follow button. That helps to promote the podcast and lets you know when the next episode is available. Also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. That promotes the podcast as well and encourages conversations about creativity. Meet Susan Vaslev.
My creative journey is very different from a lot of people.
Susan's life can be summed up in one word: creativity. Susan is the co-director of the Enchanted Forest, a theme park located in Turner, Oregon. She counts herself fortunate to have been born into a family dedicated to cultivating the creative spirit.
Our family valued supporting each other's creative ideas. And that was from the time I was a little child. So we always had the messiest house in the neighborhood because we were allowed to build forts in the house. We were allowed to put on plays. As far as we had 4 children in our family, we were always creating and doing things. So from the time I was young, that was all I knew.
In the late 60s, Susan's father, Roger Tofte, on a 20-acre land site, created and hand-built the Enchanted Forest. Susan had a front row seat for the entire experience.
I watched my father create this world of fantasy from the time I was 7 years old to when it opened when I was 14 or 15. It opened in 1971. And so I had that background of watching him create this thing from nothing.
Susan did more than watch her father build this incredible amusement park. She contributed her own creative energies.
As far as Enchanted Forest goes, I've written all the plays, I've written all the music in the park. So the park opened when I was 14 or 15. So even then when it opened, all pieces of music in the park, I wrote. Anything that is an audio, a voice, I recorded. So from the time I'm very young, I am recording, I am composing, and that just kept growing.
Now, except for the music played by the live bands in the park, all the music played in the park was written, orchestrated, and recorded by Susan. And this anomaly drew the attention of the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers.
They control the music rights for a lot of music. They do in BMI. So ASCAP was contacting me and saying, we don't believe you wrote this music or you need to prove it. And I'm like, sure, how do I prove it? And so they came out and they sent somebody first from Seattle, and he had to see where I did my composing. He had to look at my scores. He had to see where I recorded. And so he determined, yes, it's all her music. She did it. We're good. So then ASCAP didn't believe that person. They sent out somebody from New York. And so again, I had to prove it the same way. And at this point, I'm fairly young, and I think I'm in my 20s. And I'm asking them, why this big deal over me? At this point, I'm thinking of my music in the park as just mood setting. I'm thinking it's simple music. I'm not thinking it's anything great. And they said, well, you don't realize you're the only theme park in America that doesn't pay us. And yeah. And so, okay, I get that.
Growing up, Susan set her sights on music and the performing arts. Susan graduated as a music major from the University of Oregon, and upon graduation, she traveled to Paris to study with one of the best harpsichord players in the world and was on track to launch a career teaching and touring the world performing her music. That was until she had an epiphany.
I realized that performing anywhere, in Paris, wherever I was performing. It felt the same if I did a great job, if I was performing in Paris or if I was performing in Oregon. If I didn't do what I wanted to do, it felt just as bad in Paris as in Oregon. So along this time, I'm watching my teacher, who's one of the best harpsichordists in the world, and I'm watching his life as I'm studying with him. I'm living in Paris. I'm traveling to a city called Maintenant, where he lives in this castle, and I'm watching the elite of the elite and how they live their life to be on top of the performance world, which is where I thought I was headed. And I didn't really like what I saw. I saw having to sacrifice everything for it, and I saw how cutthroat it was, and I saw what it really took to be on that top, and it was never ending. And around this time, I'm 22, something like that. In my brain, I'm going, this isn't really what I want. I want the white picket fence. I want the family. I want children.
Concurrently, Susan's mother contracted cancer, prompting Susan to return to Salem to assist her father in the day-to-day business of running the Enchanted Forest. During that time, Susan met her husband and started a family. But by no means did Susan, quote, settle down. Susan's creative endeavors were just getting started, one of which was to start an Irish Celtic band that tours the state of Oregon and plays regularly at the Enchanted Forest.
I have a lot of outlets. I did a lot of acting, Enchanted Forest, creative arts, band, and in the beginning I was still performing classical, Renaissance music, things like that. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
As Susan unpacks her thoughts about creativity and the creative process, you will be enlightened, encouraged, and inspired as you continue your own journey down the wild and untamed path of creativity. Let's dive in.
I define creativity as anything you do. It's a very mindful act, but what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to all the possibilities. You're opening your mind to all the possibilities, and then it's what you pick of those possibilities and how you combine them with the other possibilities. For me, that's creativity. My creative process is first decide what I'm doing and define it. Do I need to write this play? Do I need to rewrite this play? Am I going to write a new piece of music? What am I doing? And then the next phase is all of the inspiration and the ideas, that initial surge of, it could be sketches, it could be jotting down musical ideas, but it's where I'm kind of gathering together the initial inspiration and the initial ideas, and that's a very easy stage. You're just letting it flow, and you're just, at that point, it's really enjoyable because the sky is the limit. You haven't run into any problems yet. You haven't run into any frustrations. And at this point, you're imagining the best of the best. So, there's nothing stopping anything at this point. Then the next phase, I have to know my time limit, because I am a person that I have deadline. And so there's a difference if I have a deadline. If I have a play that is going to open up on this date, that has to open up on that date. I have deadlines that are preset, and then I also have deadlines that are set by a window of time I have. For example, with the band. So I just had a foot operation, and I knew I had a window where I would be in bed for a week or two, where I couldn't even basically get out of bed. So gathered together my computers. There was a live show we did. which now I'm going to do video of all of it. So in bed, I know I have this window of time. I am doing the video while I'm in bed. And that's pretty normal for me. I'm of an age where I have operations, more often than I would like. And so, that's a window of opportunity. Or maybe before Enchanted Forest opens in the dead of winter, I've got a window of opportunity there to do something. So it's either a time limit that's imposed from the outside or one that I know I have a certain time to do something. And I've got to pay attention to that time. And then there's the next part, which is the implementation of everything it takes to make this happen. Now, that is work. The first part is fun. This part is work. And yes, there can be inspiring moments in it, but I'll give an example of my dad. So my dad out at Enchanted Forest, there are cement buildings all over the place that everything is hand done. But you have to do the metal rebar first to shape it. You have to tie all the metal lath. You have to put on the scratch coat of cement. And then the last coat is where the creative artsy stuff happens. But you've got to do everything before that. And with me, it's kind of like I start out with the fun part, and then everything becomes more and more tedious. So if I'm directing the theater, for example, I start out casting the show. The first rehearsals are wonderful, and I'm imagining the best of the best. Okay, then reality hits, and you start realizing what your actors can do and can't do. You start running into problems with this prop, that prop. And then the time limit is approaching super fast. So, or when I'm doing a CD, I'm recording a CD. The beginning part is great. You're recording, everything's wonderful. You imagine the best, and you are going for the best. But the more you get into it, the more detailed it becomes, and the more specific, and the more tedious in a lot of ways in a lot of my work. So by the end of a CD, I can be spending time just lining up that somebody didn't get their T's exactly right, but I've got to fix it. So that's kind of the way my creative process works. As I'm creating, I create for myself what I would enjoy. I'm not thinking of the public. I'm not thinking of the end outcome. I'm thinking, what would I enjoy in this medium I'm working in? But then, as far as creation, as I've developed it, it's never in the beginning stage. It's after it's pretty well along the way. Then I will go to who I trust, who I know has the same vision as me. Not anybody. Like if it's musically something we're doing, I will go to musicians I trust in our band. If it's artistic, like in the park, like my father, we would always bounce ideas off each other. And once we did something, we would pull the other in, and you would look, because you're fresh eyes, and critique. And I do that now with my son. He's got a really good artistic eye. So at a certain point, you pull somebody in with fresh eyes that you trust, and so I'm still really good on the collaborative on that end of it. But it's that end of when you have a contract and what's happening afterwards. That I've had to learn that lesson more times than one about who I get involved in, where they're actually going to have some control over that work. I really do enjoy the process, and I do enjoy the whole process. But it switches from that just pure creation to problem solving. What inspired me to work in this industry is a great question, because I think my answer is very different from other people. I feel that that is all I know. If I have time to fill, I cannot sit there. I have to create, and it doesn't have to be in any particular discipline. If I've got wheels spinning in the music area, then I can move to acting. or I can move to the arts, but and I think it's because of my background where I was raised in a family that from a very young age, that's all we did was just create, create, create. That is all I know. I do not feel comfortable. I feel like something's missing in myself if I'm not creating, if I don't have some project I'm working on. And that is, if I had nothing, I would create something to do. So my biggest inspiration has come from my father, because he built Enchanted Forest, and I watched him. He taught me how to create. So just by watching him, because he would get an idea, he would maybe make a couple sketches. If he had to turn in plans to the Planning Commission, he would do that. But basically, it was a sketch or two, and then he would start building it. And so there wasn't all of this pre-planned big thought about the artistic side of it. He would simply get going, and then he would adjust as he went. And what I also watched was how much work. It was so much work from beginning to end on a project, and I learned to expect that. So I don't expect that I just get to create something and it magically happens. It's all the work also, every step to keep going, keep going, keep going. He always had a phrase, which is not his phrase, but a quitter never wins, a winner never quits. And that is so important to carry through to the end, and just expect that there's going to be areas in there where it is true work. When I hit rough spots in creativity, when I hit what could be a block of some kind, I'm used to working with that because I work with deadlines. So I can't let that happen at all. I don't have that luxury. So I have some tricks. One is, there's a book called The 10-Minute Rule for Managers. I read that as part of my managing Enchanted Forest with my sister, and I incorporate that into my artistic life. So if I feel held up in any way, which will usually make a person back off and stay away from it a little bit, what I do is I just say, okay, you've got to sit down and look at this project for 10 minutes. And just reorient yourself to where you're at and what the next step is. And sometimes, if I'm really not in the mood, I'll just say, just sit down. Sit down and look at it, and then you can walk away. Well, I don't ever know when I've sat down for 10 minutes or just to sit down, and that's where it ended. As soon as I sit down and you start wrapping your mind around the project again, then your brain starts taking over, and it's easy to move on. So for me, it's simply make myself sit down at whatever I'm doing, or if it's choreography, make myself go through where I'm at in the song. It's just simply get actively involved, but mentally, because a lot of this is a mental game, mentally don't tell myself I have to fix it. Just sit down and be in the project. The other thing is, if I hit a rough area, if I just go to any other discipline, doesn't even have to be the discipline I'm working in, listen to live music, go to live theater, get on YouTube and do some instructional video. Learning is really inspiring for me. And anytime I watch somebody else doing something wonderful or even not wonderful, that inspires me. And as soon as I get in that loop of listening to other people, watching other people, or learning, that will also take my work in other directions. And, I really don't suffer from writer's block or any of that, because I do know how to go and move forward. When you talk about things that have not worked out and what you've learned from those, one big thing in my past sticks out to me. So I think I was in my 30s when I did this, And I wrote an opera, and I had a contract for this. And it was a 50-50 split on points. And I was the composer, arranger, everything. And then the other person was going to produce it. He had the art. This was a combination of music and art, this performance. And I'm writing and recording demos. I'm working with singers. I'm doing this for 3 years. My work is now basically done, and the other person starts to take over. And I had no say in any of this. And I heard he sent me a recording by an arranger. And it came back to me, electronic, cold. And when I heard that, I just cried. And here's 3 years of my life, and I do not like what I'm hearing. And I just don't. So I spent hours crying, got on the phone, and then ended up pulling the plug. Because in the contract it said we could each walk away with our parts. And so I pulled that plug, and it was heart-wrenching to me because so much effort, and there was such great potential in what was going to happen with that contract. It was a done deal. But I just hated what I was hearing. And so, yes, there's the devastation right at the moment when you truly let something go. And in that moment, you feel you've wasted so much time. But a lot of art and creation is a mental game. So normally when something like that happens, I'll have my initial reaction, and then very quickly I'll know I have to readjust my mindset. So then I quickly changed gears and looked at it like, okay, well, I just had a 3-year masterclass where I worked with wonderful singers. I created a whole score. I did all of this recording, and I learned a lot about the industry. And I learned never to let so much of my creative freedom go. So it was very valuable. I never, ever now let as much creative freedom go as I did in that project. I keep on creating because I do not feel right when I'm not creating. So for me, it's not like I have to push myself to create. That is my norm. And it's because that's all I did since I was a child. So I definitely, if something happens where I have a period where I can't create for some reason, I really feel like a part of myself is missing. And I've got to get back to that. But like I say, it doesn't have to be in one discipline. There was a time when I was in my 30s, where I started feeling frustrated with my work at Enchanted Forest, the theater, everything I do there, the music. I felt like I was spinning my wheels. And I was at a young age, so I want to conquer the world. I want to... And so what I did was I just went to another discipline. I went to theater, and I went and did a bunch of acting. I took more classes. I did some guest work in some plays, and that satisfied that. So then I brought that back to my work, and I was inspired again. And I've never had that happen since. So, yeah. My personal philosophy that governs my creativity is create for myself and do not try to create for other people. Even when, like I'm thinking of a time when there was a radio show down in San Francisco, American Heartbeat or something like that. Anyway, it had something to do with heartbeat. And I was hired to write the music for that. And there is the sort of thing where, yes, I'm writing for myself what I want, but then whenever I'm in that kind of situation, I'm always presenting several ideas to the person who hired me and letting their feedback be part of what controls which paths I take. And even like out in Enchanted Forest, the water show, which I love that music in the water show, but it's a big 8-minute piece. And because it's a water show, it has to have lots of variety in it. So I remember creating just tons of examples of music and then going to my father and saying, okay, what do you like? What do you not like? So I liked everything, so we're good. And he would go, well, I like that, don't like that, don't like that. And so that would also shape it. I would say that I usually know the audience I'm creating for right from the beginning. So for example, if I'm creating something for Enchanted Forest, I know it's a family audience. Now, a good example of that is the theater. The theater is comedy, and comedy has actually changed a lot over the years since I started. And now you're creating for a world that can be offended, that can be very protective of their ideas. So as I create, I do have that all in my head. And normally I know the audience I'm creating for. So right from the get-go, I will tailor that. And just even up at the theater, in rehearsals right now, in 2025 for this current play, there'll be some joke that I've written in there, and maybe it's been embellished by the actors. And there are times when I go, no, that is crossing the line, because I know the audience and I know what is most likely to be complained about. And I just look at that as my framework for this piece. You know, even in the band, we have versions of everything that are family friendly, versions that are appropriate for a pub, you know, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with adjusting for my audience. And I think it's a mistake not to know your audience. I do have creative goals. I have things on my plate that, because there were no deadlines, have sat there. I have recorded Western Town music with live musicians, fantastic musicians, just sitting there waiting to be mixed. And it never gets high enough on the list to get it done. So it sat there for 3 years, I think. And I would really like to finish that. It's very interesting because I am 69 years old now. So what I notice in myself, remember I'm a live performing musician also. My brain does not work as quickly as it used to. And when you're a live performing musician, there's a lot of things that happen. Your brain just has to be right there, clicking, lyrics, something goes wrong when somebody's playing or I'm playing, and I have to be able just really quickly. So it's always on my list to get more tricks in my brain to, as I age, be able to keep up mentally with this instantaneous response that you need. And yeah, and always, you know, writing more music, all of that. I perceive as threats to creativity. When I was thinking about this, I thought, you know, it's really 3 P's. It's procrastination, perfection, and trying to be profound. So for me, when I compare myself to others, let's take procrastination. I don't procrastinate because I've got the 10-minute rule. But in the band, we've been here for 10 years, since 2015. We have 5 CDs. And I recorded, mixed, and mastered 4 of those, 2 of which another person was working on too. Now, this other person is very talented. It is not a lack of talent. But the first one, we're supposed to be recording. I was recording one CD. He was supposed to be recording another CD at the same time. I finished mine. The other one never happened. Then the next CD, we were supposed to be doing it together. I did, I think, 10 songs to his 2 or something like that. And this is a really nice guy, really talented. And he came to me and he said, what tidbits do you have? Because I can't seem to, make it happen and get it done. And you create so much. How do you create that much? And I imparted my 10-minute rule. I simply don't let procrastination become part of the factor, because I think it happens for a lot of reasons. Fear that you're not going to be good enough, fear that other people are going to judge you. There's a lot of things that make procrastination happen, but procrastination is not productive in any way. So and I imparted my 10-minute rule to him, just sit down and don't worry about it. Just wrap your head around the project again and just look at it and think what your next step is. And that was my advice. But you do have to be able to make yourself, you have to not think if you're in the mood. You have to just, like the Nike quote, just do it. You do have to be able to just make yourself sit there for that 10 minutes or 10 seconds, whatever it is. So procrastination on a personal level is a killer of creativity. Perfection, I think, is another killer of creativity. And that is something that, comparing yourself to others, there's always going to be somebody else that you think is better, somebody that gets a lot of attention where you don't. And so I think there's a danger of trying to reach this level that everybody in the world is going to love it. It's perfect. That is an illusion. And a person has to let that go. You simply have to do the work, be open to your creative ideas, and just do it. And whatever happens in the end, happens in the end. But that idea of perfection, I think it holds a lot of people up at different stages. It may even be the releasing it to the world stage, and you just keep thinking you can make it better and better and better. And there's a time and a place to do that. When you know that if you just spent this amount of time, you really would reach this other level. There are times to do that, but it's a dangerous slope. And then the other one, trying to be profound. I think people don't want to put out works of art that are silly, less than, that other people don't look at and with a wow factor. And I felt this more in my younger years because I was a trained musician where you're playing Bach, you're playing these incredible works of music, and that is what you're used to playing. And then you go to write your piece, which doesn't stand up at all against the masters, but you're trying to make this profound work of art. But being profound is in the eye of the beholder, because what I've found out here, just thinking about my music at Enchanted Forest, which is now on CD and things like that. And I have people come up to me now, and like one time I'm walking down the street and some gal has the album and she's screaming and crying, "Oh, it's her," and getting my autograph and all this stuff. And so many times I have people come up to me and say how that's their favorite music, they love it, how it's changed their life. We've heard that a lot with the band music too. And it made me realize that you cannot judge for somebody else what is going to affect them. You simply have to put your art out there, and you cannot judge if it's profound to another person or not, or if it has some great effect on their heart. That's not for you to decide, and they will decide that. So my words of inspiration are, you are an individual that is going to have a different take on anything. So your opinion is valuable, and just don't wait for the perfect idea at any stage of the game. Just keep going, because when I create, or when I watched my father out in Enchanted Forest create, a big difference between this type of creativity and other people who really don't get started is being able to dive in and not have all the answers yet. Be able to live in that world of uncertainty and work it out as you go. So if you just don't wait for the perfect idea, have your ideas, and then start. Go, adjust as you go. And it's worked well for Enchanted Forest.